How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to another video, and today we're going to be talking about the PlayStation financials because we're all financial experts and we've all got to get our take on this right because we have all got a financial degree. We are all financial experts. So I'm going to go through this and talk about the stuff that's pretty much not really number related, but more broadening on what's actually going on in the games industry. But I wanted to start off with this, and this contradicts exactly what I was saying in the entirety. But now we've gone from talking about profits to revenue. Do you remember when the revenue was the big thing and Microsoft had bigger revenue, and then all the PlayStation fans came out and going, oh my god, that's not profit? But now they don't care about profit. Now all they care about is revenue. The hypocrisy in this one is so real that even if it slapped you around the face with a wet fish, it wouldn't be as hysterical as it is listening to this and seeing what they're trying to portray here. And it's not just one of them. I've got two back-to-back here as they're both trying to take this as a win. Revenue, as Nibs of all people would say, means absolutely nothing when you don't know the profit, because you can have a lot of gross revenue, but hey, if it costs you the same amount, you make zero profit. So without knowing those profit numbers, it's a bit of a waster. And as we know from previously, Microsoft was making more profit than Sony, and in the last quarter alone, it's confirmed that Microsoft did make more profit, even though not by much, but they did. So revenue can be revenue. All that's showing is that Sony is spending way more than they need to and is still not making as much money. At the end of the day, the analogy that I use where I work is, if you charge £1 million for that project, but it costs you 1,001p, whereas the other project costs you £1 and it costs you 10p to do, that 90p is way more valuable than that 1p that you've lost, because in that 1 million case, you've lost a penny. In the 90p case, you've made 90 pence. You get the picture I'm trying to portray here. Hopefully you do anyway. So profit is king. Revenue is not. Revenue looks nice when you're flashing numbers, but when you come down to the actual profit, that's what matters, because that's what you get to take home. So it looks like this one's quite interesting. PlayStation 5 price hike could be next due to tariffs, Sony wants, and they're warning this quite clearly. How do we know this? Because we have this clip over here, which we are going to play. Now, if we listen to what they're saying.
Regarding the tariff, let me answer to the tariff question. 100 billion yen impact have been it's assuming the official tariff rate, which has been announced in hardware. Hardware business is included in this. In terms of our portfolio, GNS, games, and also ETNS and INSS, semiconductors. So those three segments, we are actually incorporating on par basis from these three businesses. In terms of the tariff, we are not just simply calculating the simple tariff to come up with 100 billion yen, but thinking about the currently available information and also looking at the market trend, we may pass on to the price and also shipment allocation. So we are taking a different measures in managing to come up to the 100 billion yen impact. That's what we are thinking. Thank you very much.
So essentially what they're saying there is there's 100 billion yen. Is it 100 billion or 100 million? I think it's at 100 million. But there's a lot of money being impacted here to PlayStation or Sony as a company, and they're looking at ways where they can try and, you know, kind of waive this or sort it out. But the way they're seeing it, it's going to hit their products, including PlayStation. So a price impact, you know, is imminent. You know, if they can't find another way to do it, and I assume that means layoffs or some kind like that, which I hope they don't go down that route, because that would be awful. It looks like the prices are going to increase. So I say this again, if you are looking to get a PlayStation 5 Pro and are considering it, get it now before the price hike. They're basically telling you that the PS5 Pro or the PlayStation consoles are about to get a price hike. Now, they did get in 3 months worth of supply. Now, the shipment, the tariffs have been paused for 90 days. That is the 3 months. So I suspect all of that is going to go. Anything that comes in now is going to be subject to the new tariffs. So, yeah, you've been warned. But it's also over here that there's another video of Hiroki. And let's just listen. And, what he's saying here is they are considering actually doing the building of the PS5 units in the US, which is what Trump wants. But of course, that means higher labor costs, higher production costs. Those chips and materials are still being manufactured over in China, Taiwan, or wherever, Indonesia, wherever they're being manufactured. So they're still going to be subject to that huge 130% tariff or whatever it is that's going to come in. So those parts aren't manufactured in the UK. It's just the assembly. But, the actual building of the console itself is also going to have higher construction costs, which means the console is that cost that it's now costing to build that in the US will be passed on to the consumer. So if it costs them now an extra $150, $200 to build that per machine, that cost is going to be passed on to the consumer. This isn't the win-win the consumer thinks it is. Yes, it's going to provide potentially more jobs if they don't automate the whole thing, in which case there'll be no jobs. But if they do, and then the production cost goes up because we know that the labor costs around the world is way higher than it is in China, Korea, and stuff like that, well, then be prepared for even higher costs. So both of these are basically telling you that the cost of the PS5 console is about to shoot up, and shoot up in a not so friendly way. And yes, it is because of the tariffs. Now, there's this statement over here as well from Destin. PlayStation financials are out. Some interesting facts. 77.8 million PS5 sold. That is shipped, not sold. There is a distinct difference, but you know what? I'm not even going to argue that statement because everyone keeps saying I'm wrong. I'm not wrong. It is 77.8 million shipped. 80% of those is digital, which is really interesting considering every time you see a PlayStation game come out that's a digital, or an Xbox game come out that's digital, you get a lot of people screaming, and it does really seem like they are the vocal minority. But 80% tells you that the gaming industry, in terms of a medium, is heading in one direction and one direction only. By next year, I expect this to be somewhere around 85-87%. The age of physical media is coming to an end. Now, this one is quite interesting. MAU is at 124 million, which is down 5 million versus Q3. But this was the same thing as last year as well. So there seems to be a downfall in gaming for Sony every Q4, because last Q3 they had 123 million, and then it dropped down to 118 million when it was Q4, which is again the 5 million. So it seems they consistently have a drop in 5 million every year. So that's interesting. But, it's clear, it is odd that they are focusing on MAUs now more and more, which tells you the direction that they're going. And in terms of game sales, a lot of people have given Destin flack for this, and it even provided a source which we're going to look at. They're saying, oh, this information is old, and it's, unfortunately the listed game sales are simply last officially enough. I don't care, and neither does Destin. The reality, and a lot of people are saying this, right? A respectful, constructive criticism. You've got all the PlayStation shows coming out, rushing out to defend Sony as they normally would. But here's my point with this. If Sony is providing this to their shareholders and making this public, then that is the information that Sony wants you to go by. That is the only official response. I don't care what Chris String says or what anyone else says. If this is good enough for Sony as an official statement, then that means these numbers are more or less on point. Now, if they're not, then that means Sony is lying to their shareholders. And that's another thing entirely, right? They're withholding information on what the actual figures are, because everyone knows that Sony has these numbers officially. So to turn around and say that they haven't is irrelevant. These are the numbers that Sony have deemed, they themselves have deemed worthy of being reported. So regardless of how you look at it, Destin isn't lying. He's not making shit up. He is basically talking about stuff that has been publicly released by Sony as of this earnings call, right? So hopefully we can get past that. The reality is, if they were a lot higher, they would probably be singing it from the rooftops. At least I would. Why wouldn't you? All right. Now we can come to this one over here. This one's a bit of a mock because it says, but I was told it's all about console sales, not engagement and MAU. Boom goes the dynamite. And it is now all becoming about the MAU because that is where it's going. And as you can see here, new Sony CFO Lin Tao says there's been 2 major changes to Sony Interactive Entertainment since the recent leadership buyout. Before, it was all about selling units, how many you can sell in terms of physical copies or digital copies was the focus, but now management is focused on engagement and MAU leading to profitability. Now, what does this actually mean? This means that their games are going to go out to a wider audience. Now, I'm not sitting here and saying that they're going to go to Xbox or to the Nintendo Switch, even though we've now seen games, at least one go to, well, a number of games now going to the Nintendo Switch. But this just means that they're going to be much more aggressive with their push out to other platforms, and this could eventually lead to day and date, which I suspect it will do, because at the end of the day, with ballooning prices of their costs, and you just saw their revenue of 331 million or billion, whatever it was. I think it was billion, but the profit on that is probably in the single digits. And from Q3, it was below what Xbox made. So the revenue means nothing if you're not actually balancing it out. And the way to actually make more money is to get your software into as many hands as possible, and limiting it to, give or take 70 million consoles, probably a little less that's actually in people's hands, is not enough. And they've already seen how not releasing day and date on PC can affect and does affect the sales of their games. So, Helldivers 2 is a prime example of releasing day and date and it working. Financial discipline within the first party studios. In the past, there were various issues. We are still halfway, but I think the mindset has changed significantly. So I'm assuming this is talking about those AAA blockbuster videos that cost hundreds and hundreds of millions to make, and then then require a huge amount of intern for it to actually break even. I think Spider-Man overall, between digital and physical, needed about 14 million units to actually break even. 7.2 million was what it needed digitally, where there's no manufacturing cost or retailer cost. If you bundle that in with the bundled copies, I know Spider-Man 2 is a weird one, but that's the one we have information from because of the Insomniac leaks and the whole 50% when it's bundled in and stuff like that, for the publisher, in this case being Marvel. So yeah, it's a big problem. It's a big problem, these contracts and these costs for games. And it's clear that now they're looking to increase engagement and increase that player count on PSN, because at the end of the day, if you've got 70 million people playing your games, that's great. But if you got 500 million playing, that extra 430 million, if they each spent £1 at the minimum, is 430 million pounds, right? Or dollars. So at the end of the day, that's the way they see it. And obviously not all of them are going to spend money, but some are going to spend more than the others. And by having a bigger pool, there's a higher chance of you getting in that microtransaction money or whatever it is that you're going to be adding on as sellable transactional items inside your games. But this is where all of this engagement and MAU is coming from, because it does increase revenue, and we've seen that already. And this is pretty much the approach Microsoft is doing, and it's working. So Sony isn't far behind, and they've already seen the change. And by Microsoft already using PlayStation's platform in a way to increase their own profits, it won't be long before Sony probably look at that and say, why aren't we doing this? And if Sony isn't saying it, their shareholders damn well will, because they're going to be seeing those other shareholders making bank. And shareholders don't care about feelings or anything. They just care about how much money is coming in. It's just the way it is. And as you can see here, Sony CEO and CFO announced what I think is a significant change to the PlayStation business. This is MBG saying this. They said their focus with the previous leadership was selling units. Their new focus is MAU. Expect to see PlayStation get more aggressive with branching out. And this is pretty much what I've been saying, right? I don't think it's going to be that aggressive during the PS5, but I do think it's going to be, with the PS6. I think that's where they're going to really start to bankroll this. And, it says, damn, I bought my PS5. Not necessarily. They're saying these things now, but they are not likely to immediately be implemented. I think anything, it's in preparation for the PlayStation 5. I'm assuming it said meant PlayStation 6. Okay, yeah, it did. PlayStation 6. My understanding is that it means getting someone into the PlayStation ecosystem now is more important than selling a console, because that means potential microtransactions. These microtransactions cost almost nothing to build and have a really high profit return, right? Profit margin. Before, the console sale was the single most important thing, as it was the only way to get someone into the ecosystem. Thanks to Microsoft, which he's admitted here, that has been changing, though. And it's clear, because Microsoft has started this, and as a business only cares about one thing: making money. And we've said this all along, that Sony's transition is always slower than everyone else's. Nintendo are moving at a snail pace. I don't think they'll ever change. But Sony as a business wants to make more money. And the way that they're going to make more money is by allowing people to play these games in other places easier. It wouldn't surprise me if GeForce Now actually started getting games for PlayStation that were on PC to be able to play there. Because do you know why? Because through cloud gaming, you don't have to have a PC, you don't have to have a console, but it is another avenue for you to be able to play those games. And the best part about that is you still need to buy those games on Steam or Epic Store in order to be able to play them. And if you're paying £70 to play that game, plus whatever your subscription is to GeForce Now, guess what? Sony is still taking 70% of that money. And that is how they're seeing this. And that is why they're saying MAUs right now is the most important way. That's the most important thing, because gaming on a box now is no longer the only real medium of playing these games. And Microsoft has proven that, and their numbers have proven that. And so Sony now is seeing that, at least their shareholders, I'm assuming, and they're asking the right questions. Why aren't we doing that? Why aren't we making that money? And well, change is afoot. And we always knew this was coming, but I think the real fallout and the real crying from the PlayStation fans will happen once we start to see like big games, like let's say Wolverine, come day and date to PC. Once that happens, I think you're going to see a seismic shift in, fans' behavior, and you're going to see a real shift in how people react. But ultimately, even if you are a PlayStation fan and you move over to PC, you're still going to need a PSN login to play. Sure, Sony's going to miss out on that $60, $80, or whatever it costs to get PS Plus, but they're going to get a completely massive audience through potentially the cloud and PC, which will completely offset that and push it even higher and make even more profits. Well, that's just my thoughts on this. Like I said, I'm not a, I didn't want to dive into the numbers too much, because at the end of the day, I don't have a PhD in economics. So I can tell the broad stuff, but I'm sure there's stuff there that I simply just won't get. But I'm just not going to go into it because I'm done with all that stuff. But I will look at the facts that's in front of us and make a educated, argument for it. And it's clear that Sony is looking at what Microsoft is doing very intently and is going to follow suit. But let me know what you think in the comment section below. Let's have that discussion. And if you've enjoyed this content, smash that like button, hit that red button, hit that bell to stay up to date with all content I release. And if you've enjoyed this content even more, you can leave a super thanks directly below the video, or support me even further by becoming a YouTube member. Of course, the easiest and freest way to support me is by hitting that like button, leaving a comment, subscribing, and hitting that bell. That tells YouTube that you've really enjoyed this content, and it will help push it to other audiences and get this video promoted. 65% of you are not subscribed members, which is fine. I appreciate your viewership. The fact that you return, I'm humbled. But if you could subscribe, it would help me get to my 10,000 goal that bit easier. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you had an awesome time watching this, and I'll see you in the next one. Remain legend.